A widowed cowboy waited 5 months for help, until an Apache woman answered his baby's cry. The morning sun rose slowly over the rugged plains, casting long shadows across the cowboy's small ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dry grass and wildflowers, but it did little to ease the heavy weight in his chest. He sat on the edge of a worn wooden chair, his hat in his hands, staring at the crib where his baby slept. The tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, but the peaceful image did nothing to calm the storm inside him. He was a widower now, alone with a newborn in a world that seemed vast, empty, and unwelcoming. He could still remember the day his wife had passed. It had been sudden, a brief illness that no one had expected. One morning she had been strong and cheerful, helping him mend fences and tend the animals. By the next evening she was gone, leaving only silence and sorrow in her place. The cowboy had felt as though the earth had shifted beneath his feet, leaving him suspended in a space between despair and disbelief. The thought that he had to raise a child alone terrified him, and yet, looking at his son, he found a spark of determination he didn't know he possessed. The ranch was small but sufficient for their needs. A few horses grazed in the fields, a couple of cows wandered near the barn, and a sturdy dog patrolled the perimeter. Normally, this place had been filled with laughter and warmth. His wife had loved the land, the animals, and even the hard work that life demanded. Now every corner reminded him of what he had lost. Her voice, her smile, the way she would hum softly while cooking breakfast, all of it haunted him with both sorrow and longing. Taking a deep breath, he rose to tend to the morning chores. The sun had just begun to climb higher, and he knew the animals needed feeding. He filled the troughs with water, scattered feed for the horses, and milked the cows with steady hands. His movements were mechanical, almost robotic, as if he could somehow keep himself busy enough to forget the ache in his heart. The baby, swaddled in a soft blanket, cried from the crib, a small yet urgent sound that pierced through the silence. The cowboy hurried back inside, scooping the child into his arms and rocking him gently. "Shh! It's okay, little one," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "Daddy's here. Daddy won't let anything happen to you." The baby's eyes opened briefly, glistening with innocence, and then closed again, soothed by the warmth of his father's arms. It was moments like these that gave him strength, even if only for a few minutes at a time. He had no family nearby, no neighbors who checked in regularly. The nearest town was miles away, and the roads were rough, often impassable during bad weather. Help was not something he could count on. Every task, every decision rested solely on his shoulders, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a stone. He fed the baby, changing diapers and humming softly, though he had never been good at lullabies. His hands were calloused from years of work, yet delicate enough to handle the fragile body of his son. He spoke to the baby as if words alone could protect him, telling stories of the land, of wild horses that ran free, and of the father who loved him more than anything in the world. Each story was simple, sometimes awkward, but the baby seemed to listen, eyes wide open, as if understanding every word. Despite the love he felt, exhaustion was creeping in. Nights were the hardest. The baby would cry endlessly, and the cowboy had no one to share the burden with. He tried to keep the home warm, to cook meals, and to ensure the animals were cared for, all while sleep eluded him. Some nights he would sit outside under the stars, holding his son close, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, and wonder how he could possibly continue. The grief was a constant companion, whispering reminders of loss, yet the tiny life in his arms gave him a reason to go on. He thought often of his wife, remembering the warmth she had brought into their home. She had been a source of laughter, of patience, and of endless love. He missed her guidance, her hands that had seemed to know exactly what to do in every situation. Yet even in her absence, he felt her presence in the smallest things, the way the kitchen still smelled faintly of her cooking, the soft quilt she had made for the baby, and the garden she had tended so lovingly. These were bittersweet reminders, comforting and painful at the same time. Days blurred into weeks. The cowboy learned to manage chores more efficiently, discovered ways to soothe his child, and found small moments of joy amidst the hardship. A calf born in the field became a source of delight. The sight of a hawk soaring above the plains brought a moment of awe, and the first blossoms of spring reminded him that life continued, even after loss. Yet, despite these small joys, loneliness remained. There were no voices to share victories with, no hands to help when the workload grew too heavy. The ranch was his world, and yet it felt incomplete. He wrote letters to friends he had known long ago, hoping for advice or even just a kind word. But responses were slow or non-existent. Sometimes he wondered if anyone truly understood the isolation he felt, the constant juggling of responsibilities, and the endless worry for a helpless child. He prayed silently at night, not for himself, but for the safety of his son, hoping that some unseen hand would guide them through the hardships ahead. One evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset, the baby cried more loudly than ever. The cowboy's heart ached with every sound. He had tried everything, feeding, rocking, singing, but nothing worked. Frustration and worry threatened to overwhelm him, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself of the promise he had made. He would protect his child, no matter what it took. He wrapped the baby close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his chest, and whispered words of love and assurance. As darkness fell over the plains, the cowboy gazed out at the horizon, the stars beginning to twinkle above. The wind carried a chill rustling through the grass and whispering across the empty fields. He felt small in the vastness of the world, yet in the same breath, he felt a sense of quiet determination. He was alone, yes, but he was not defeated. Each challenge was met with perseverance, each hardship with courage. And though the nights were long and the days exhausting, he knew that he would continue for the sake of the little life depending on him. In those quiet moments he began to understand a truth that grief had hidden. Even in the darkest times, love could sustain a person. The bond between him and his child grew stronger with each passing day, a thread of hope woven through the tapestry of sorrow. The ranch, the plains, the animals, and the endless sky became witnesses to a father's devotion, a testament to resilience in the face of loss. And so, as the first month passed and then the second, the cowboy continued his routine, facing each day with quiet strength. He repaired fences with careful hands, tended the animals with diligence, and cradled his child with unwavering love. The ranch remained a place of hardship, yet also a place where a small, fragile life thrived, nurtured by a father's devotion and the quiet courage that only hardship can teach. Though the world outside remained distant, and help seemed a dream too far to reach, the cowboy and his child endured. Every cry, every sleepless night, every challenge became part of a story of survival, love, and unwavering determination. In the vast, untamed wilderness, a father and son found strength in each other, waiting patiently for the day when the world might offer a helping hand. A day when hope would arrive in the form of someone who could see the need and answer it. And in those long, quiet hours, with only the wind and stars as companions, the cowboy held his baby close, whispering promises into the night. Promises of protection, of love, and of a future where they would no longer be alone. Each promise carried the weight of his grief, yes, but also the power of his determination. For in his heart he knew that as long as he kept going, as long as he held on, the world might yet answer their cries. The days stretched long and monotonous on the cowboy's ranch. 5 months had passed since the loss of his wife, and while the sharp sting of grief had softened slightly, it had not disappeared. Each morning began the same way, the cold light of dawn creeping through the wooden shutters, the soft cries of his baby echoing through the quiet house, and the weight of responsibility pressing on him like never before. The cowboy had grown stronger, learning the rhythm of chores and the demands of a tiny life. But the loneliness never eased. He would wake early, before the sun fully rose, to tend the animals. The horses needed feeding, the cows needed milking, and the fields needed inspection. Each task was necessary yet exhausting. And all the while, the baby's cries never stopped for long. Some days it seemed as though the little one knew his father's fatigue, and he cried harder, demanding attention even as the cowboy tried to keep the ranch running. There were moments when the cowboy felt that he could collapse under the weight of it all, yet he reminded himself that giving up was never an option. This child depended entirely on him, and he would not fail. He had grown skilled in ways he never imagined. He learned to change diapers with one hand while holding the baby with the other. He could prepare meals quickly, repairing fences in the afternoon while singing softly to calm the crying infant. Despite his growing proficiency, every day was still a struggle. The cowboy found himself longing for guidance, for someone to show him how to balance these new responsibilities. He missed his wife more than ever, wishing for her comforting presence and her patience. There were nights when he would sit on the porch, holding the baby close and whisper stories to him that his wife had once told. These moments were bittersweet, a mixture of grief, nostalgia, and deep love. Letters to friends and distant relatives had long since stopped producing answers. He had sent messages weeks ago, asking for advice or even just a friendly voice, but nothing had returned. Sometimes he wondered if the world had forgotten him entirely, leaving him stranded in a place that felt both beautiful and unforgiving. The sun set slowly over the horizon, painting the plains with shades of gold and orange, yet the beauty of the landscape did little to ease the ache of isolation. The nights were the hardest. The baby's cries would rise like a desperate call in the darkness, and the cowboy would pace the wooden floors, his own exhaustion growing with every passing hour. One particular evening, as the wind whispered through the tall grass, the cowboy felt a wave of despair wash over him. The baby had cried nearly nonstop for hours. He had fed him, rocked him, and even carried him outside to watch the moon rise, hoping the fresh air might calm the infant. Nothing worked. Tears welled in his eyes as he sank onto the porch steps, holding the child close to his chest. He whispered words of love and reassurance, though his voice trembled with fatigue and sorrow. "I know, little one. I know it's hard, but I promise we'll get through this. I won't leave you alone." Despite the exhaustion, the cowboy refused to give up. He experimented with different methods to soothe the baby, humming old tunes, walking through the fields, gently rocking him while inspecting the fences, and even trying to mimic the comforting sounds of the wind in the creek nearby. Slowly, he learned the small signs that indicated the baby's needs, the way his tiny hands clenched when hungry, the way his legs kicked when uncomfortable, the way his eyes glistened when he felt lonely. These small observations became their own language, a silent understanding between father and child. Even with these small victories, there were days when despair returned with full force. Supplies sometimes ran low, and the isolation felt more oppressive during storms or bitterly cold nights. The cowboy had no one to turn to when illness struck the baby or when the animals needed urgent care. Yet each time he faced a problem, he found a way to manage. He became resourceful out of necessity, learning to mend fences with limited tools, improvise solutions for feeding the animals, and even create makeshift toys to keep the baby occupied. Every challenge was met with determination and a stubborn will to survive. He thought often of what his wife would have done in his place. He remembered her laughter, the gentle way she encouraged him, and her calm strength during difficult times. Her memory became a quiet guide, inspiring him to push forward even when he felt at the edge of his strength. The baby, though too young to understand the depth of the loss, seemed to sense his father's emotions. There were moments when the child's soft coos and smiles would lift the weight of the day, offering fleeting glimpses of joy that reminded the cowboy why he endured. As weeks turned into months, he began to notice changes in himself. He was no longer the man who had collapsed in despair during the first days of solitude. He was stronger, more patient, and surprisingly resilient. His movements were confident, his problem-solving sharper, and his heart more capable of balancing grief with hope. Yet, the longing for human connection never faded. He craved someone who could see the struggle, someone who could offer guidance, or even just a kind smile. It was a quiet yearning that settled into the background of every day, persistent but unobtrusive, like the wind over the plains. One afternoon, the baby cried louder than usual, and the cowboy felt a sharp pang of fear. He rushed to the crib, finding the child fussing and restless. Nothing seemed to calm him. The cowboy held the baby close and walked toward the barn, thinking perhaps the sounds of the animals would provide comfort. The gentle lowing of cows and the rhythmic whinny of horses seemed to have some effect, but only briefly. He realized that no amount of distraction or effort could replace the simple comfort of another human being. The cowboy began to understand the harsh reality of his situation. 5 months of near total isolation had taught him resilience, yes, but also the limits of solitary endurance. He had developed routines, learned skills, and grown emotionally stronger, yet the ache of loneliness remained. He longed for a helping hand, a compassionate presence, or even just a familiar voice to break the silence. Each day was a careful balance between survival, love for his child, and the quiet hope that someone, somewhere, might notice his struggle. Despite the hardships, the bond between father and child grew stronger. The cowboy learned to anticipate the baby's needs, responding to subtle cues with instinctive care. He discovered a rhythm in their lives, a pattern that offered some stability in an otherwise unpredictable world. He found joy in small accomplishments, a baby's first smile, a successful milking, a repaired fence that stood strong against the wind. These victories, though modest, reminded him that life continued even in isolation, and that love could provide a force powerful enough to endure the harshest conditions. Yet the cowboy knew that they could not survive on resilience alone. Food, medical care, and guidance were necessities he could not always provide on his own. The thought of reaching out to the distant town weighed heavily on him. The journey was long, and the roads were treacherous. But he realized that staying isolated forever was impossible. Something had to change. Somewhere beyond the horizon, he hoped, someone would answer the cry that he and his child had been sending into the wilderness for months. As another month passed, the routine of survival continued. The cowboy rose with the sun, worked tirelessly through the day, and soothed his baby at night. Sleep was scarce, but determination never waned. He found comfort in the simple beauty around him, the changing seasons, the golden fields, the sound of the river nearby, and the endless sky overhead. Each day was a struggle, yet each day also held a quiet triumph, a reminder that love and perseverance could sustain even the most isolated souls. And so, the 5 months wore on. The cowboy learned to navigate the complex balance of grief, duty, and love. He grew stronger, wiser, and more patient. But deep within, he knew that the world beyond his ranch still held possibilities of help, companionship, and care that might one day arrive. He kept the hope alive, however faint, that someone would hear their cries. And as he held his baby close each night, whispering words of love and reassurance, he knew that their bond, fragile yet unbreakable, would carry them through. Until the day when another would finally answer the call that had gone unanswered for so long. The wind had a different sound that morning, sharper and more insistent as it swept across the plains. The cowboy was already awake, carrying his baby in one arm while he repaired a broken fence near the edge of the property. The baby's cries were softer than usual, but the father remained alert. He had grown used to the constant demands of the tiny life in his care, and each sound held meaning, hunger, discomfort, or simply the desire for comfort. The cowboy's eyes scanned the horizon as he worked, searching for clouds that might bring rain or shadows that might hide danger. It was a routine he had learned to master over the last 5 months, but even the most practiced eyes could not anticipate everything. Far beyond the ranch, deep in the quiet stretches of wilderness, a woman moved silently among the trees. She was Apache, skilled in the ways of the land and the knowledge passed down from generations before her. She understood the language of the wind, the patterns of the animals, and the signs of life that often went unnoticed by those who did not live as closely with the earth. That morning, as she gathered herbs near a small creek, her attention was caught by a sound that was different from the usual calls of birds or the rustling of the grass. It was a cry, sharp and insistent, carried across the open plains by the morning wind. The sound tugged at her heart, familiar yet strange. She paused, listening carefully, and then heard it again. The unmistakable wail of a small child. Her instincts told her immediately that someone was in need. She knew the land well and could sense the direction the sound came from. Without hesitation, she moved toward it, her steps silent and deliberate. guided by experience and the urgency she felt in her chest. As she drew closer, the cries became clearer. She could see a lone figure working near the fence, a man holding a tiny infant, both seemingly unaware of the world around them. The woman slowed, careful not to alarm them, and observed from a distance. She noticed the exhaustion etched into the cowboy's posture, the way he shifted the baby from one arm to another, the furrowed brow that spoke of sleepless nights and unending worry. She understood immediately. This man was struggling, carrying burdens far greater than any one person should bear alone. The cowboy, for his part, did not notice the figure watching him. His attention was fully on the baby, who had begun to fuss again, restless and irritable. He shifted his weight, rocked the child gently, and whispered words meant to soothe. The sun climbed higher, warming the plains, but it offered little comfort against the fatigue he felt in his bones. Every sound, the creak of the fence, the distant call of a crow, seemed magnified in his tired mind. He was aware, in a way that only those truly isolated can understand, of just how alone he was. Finally, after a moment of hesitation, the woman stepped forward, letting the baby's cries guide her. She did not shout or announce herself. She merely moved with quiet confidence, approaching slowly so as not to startle either the man or the child. The cowboy, hearing footsteps on the soft earth behind him, turned quickly, eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, he was on guard, unsure if the figure was friend or foe. But then he saw her face, calm, determined, and compassionate, and he sensed no threat, only the presence of someone who might help. Are you all right?" she asked gently, her voice soft, yet firm. She stepped closer, allowing the baby's cries to continue, knowing that her presence alone might help. The cowboy swallowed hard, his throat dry. I'm trying," he replied, his voice rough and unpracticed. It's been hard. For months, I've been alone with him. I don't know what to do sometimes." His words tumbled out, an honest confession of desperation. The exhaustion and worry that had been building for months poured into the open air between them. The woman nodded knowingly. "I can see that," she said. "And you have done well to survive this long. Caring for a child alone is not easy. May I help?" Her words were simple, but they carried a weight of kindness and understanding that the cowboy had not felt in months. Relief washed over him like a sudden rain. He had almost forgotten that help was possible, that someone could hear the cries he had sent into the wilderness and respond. He nodded, unsure of what to say, but grateful beyond words. She approached carefully, extending her hands first to the baby, then to the cowboy, offering guidance rather than command. It was a gesture of respect, of understanding that he had been doing his best. Together they worked to soothe the child. The woman demonstrated gentle techniques, showing how to cradle the baby in a way that eased discomfort and calmed restlessness. The cowboy followed her instructions, amazed at how quickly the infant's cries softened into small coos and then peaceful sleep. For the first time in months he felt a sense of calm, a glimmer of hope that perhaps he was not entirely alone after all. Over the next few hours they settled near the porch, talking quietly as the baby slept in the father's arms. The woman shared her knowledge of the land, explaining simple remedies for common ailments, ways to make the home safer for a child, and techniques for soothing an infant. The cowboy listened intently, absorbing every word. It was more than practical guidance. It was a connection, a human bond that had been missing for so long. He realized that he had been surviving, yes, but now he was learning to thrive, guided by the presence of someone who understood. The conversation shifted naturally to the hardships of isolation. The cowboy spoke of the long months, the endless chores, the loneliness, and the constant worry for his child. The woman listened, never interrupting, offering only empathy and encouragement. "You have done well," she said softly. "And you are not alone anymore. There is strength in knowing that someone cares and is willing to help." Her words were simple, yet they carried a profound sense of reassurance, a balm for the years of silent struggle he had endured. As the day turned toward evening, the woman helped the cowboy prepare a simple meal. She demonstrated how to make the most of the supplies he had, combining practicality with care. The baby, now calm and drowsy, lay content in a small bed nearby, the sounds of gentle conversation filling the previously silent home. The cowboy marveled at the ease with which she moved through the space, her confidence and skill reminding him of his wife's quiet competence. Yet unlike before, he felt no envy, only gratitude, for the help had arrived at exactly the right moment. When the meal was complete, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the plains in shades of gold and orange. The baby had fallen asleep again, and the only sounds were the whisper of the wind and the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. The cowboy felt a sense of peace he had not experienced in months. For the first time, he could imagine a future in which he was not entirely alone, a future where help was possible and hope could be real. The woman spoke quietly of her own life, of her connection to the land and of the traditions she carried with her. She offered guidance without imposing, knowledge without judgment. The cowboy listened, realizing that he had been given more than help with the baby. He had been given the gift of understanding and companionship. It was a rare and precious thing in a world that had often felt cold and indifferent. Night fell, and the stars began to twinkle above. The cowboy stood, carrying the baby carefully in his arms, and felt a surge of gratitude for the presence of the woman who had answered the cries he had sent into the wilderness. He realized that survival had been possible before, but now life could be better, brighter, safer, filled with the possibility of human connection that he had almost forgotten. Before leaving, the woman offered one last piece of advice. "You are strong, and your child is lucky to have you. But never forget, strength is not always about doing everything alone. There is no shame in accepting help, especially when it comes from someone who understands." The cowboy nodded solemnly, understanding the truth of her words. As she walked back into the trees, disappearing from view but leaving a sense of reassurance behind, the cowboy felt the first real sense of hope in months. The baby stirred in his arms, opening bright eyes that seemed to reflect the fading sunlight. He smiled down at the child, feeling a warmth in his heart that had been missing for so long. For the first time in half a year, he believed that help could arrive, that the world could offer kindness, and that their journey through hardship was not meant to be faced entirely alone. The night was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. The baby slept peacefully. The wind whispered gently across the plains, and the cowboy held his child with renewed purpose. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, that life on the ranch would continue to test his strength, and that the months ahead would require patience and perseverance. But now he also knew that hope had found its way to them, and with it came the knowledge that someone had truly answered the call that had gone unanswered for so long. And in that quiet golden moment, the cowboy made a silent promise, not just to survive, but to embrace the help, the guidance, and the human connection that had finally reached him, changing the rhythm of their lives forever. The morning sun broke over the horizon, casting long, warm rays across the plains. The cowboy stirred, the baby still sleeping peacefully in the crib. For the first time in months, he felt a quiet hope within him, a lightness in his chest that he had not known since the day his wife passed. The previous day's encounter with the Apache woman lingered in his mind. Her presence, calm and confident, had changed something deep inside him. He had realized that help was not a distant dream. It could be real, tangible, and kind. That morning, as he stepped outside to check on the animals, he saw her approaching again. She moved with the quiet certainty of someone accustomed to the land, yet her eyes held warmth and understanding. The cowboy felt a mix of relief and gratitude. He had not expected her return, but seeing her now filled him with reassurance. The baby began to stir in his arms, sensing the gentle energy of her presence, and the cowboy knew that their lives were about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. She greeted him with a nod, her voice soft, yet steady. "I thought I would come back. There is much I can teach you, and I can help you care for him more easily." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience and compassion. The cowboy nodded, grateful for any assistance, and together they walked towards the barn, where the animals awaited. The woman began by showing him small adjustments that would make daily life easier. She demonstrated a better way to carry the baby while feeding the animals, ensuring that neither father nor child would be overexerted. She taught him how to prepare a warm meal for the baby using ingredients he already had, emphasizing nutrition and comfort. Each piece of advice was practical, grounded in years of knowledge and delivered with patience. The cowboy followed her instructions, amazed at how simple changes could make life so much more manageable. Over the next few days, she continued to visit, gradually taking on a more active role in their daily routine. She showed him how to soothe the baby when he cried excessively, using techniques that involved gentle motion, soft humming, and the careful use of blankets to create a sense of security. The cowboy watched and learned, applying her guidance until he grew confident in his ability to comfort his child. For the first time, he felt capable rather than desperate. The baby responded immediately to her presence. He seemed to sense her kindness, his cries softening whenever she approached. The cowboy observed the bond forming between his child and this compassionate woman. It was a bond built on care and trust, and it brought the cowboy a sense of relief he had not known he would feel again. Nights that once seemed unbearable became easier as he applied her techniques to calm the baby and create a peaceful routine. In addition to the baby's care, the woman helped the cowboy manage the ranch more efficiently. She taught him ways to repair fences more quickly, showing how to use minimal tools to achieve maximum results. She advised on feeding schedules for the animals and ways to preserve food for longer periods. Her knowledge extended beyond mere survival. She showed him methods that would improve their quality of life, making the ranch a safer and more manageable home. The cowboy began to notice changes in himself as well. Where he had once been exhausted and frustrated, he now felt a sense of calm confidence. He could anticipate the baby's needs, manage the animals with ease, and handle unexpected problems without panic. The constant strain of isolation had eased, replaced by a quiet determination supported by the guidance of someone who understood both the land and the demands of caring for life. One afternoon, a small challenge arose. A fence had collapsed in the northern field, and the baby began to cry just as he was preparing to fix it. The cowboy felt a moment of panic, unsure how to handle both tasks. The woman stepped forward without hesitation, taking the baby gently in her arms. "Go," she said. "I will watch him. Fix the fence. We will manage this together." Her words were simple, but they carried immense relief. The cowboy worked quickly, repairing the fence with care, knowing that his child was safe in capable hands. When he returned, he found the baby calm and smiling, a small giggle escaping his lips as the woman handed him back. The cowboy realized in that moment how transformative her help had become. It was not just practical assistance. It was reassurance, partnership, and the creation of a life that felt possible once more. Over time, their collaboration grew. The woman taught him ways to make simple toys for the baby from scraps around the ranch, ways to engage the child's mind and body, and methods for creating routines that fostered both security and growth. The cowboy observed with pride as his son reached milestones. First giggles, first attempts to crawl, and the early babbles that hinted at words to come. Each moment was a victory. Each small success a testament to the strength of care and patience. Even the cowboy's spirit, long weighed down by grief, began to heal. He found himself smiling more, laughing quietly at the baby's antics, and appreciating the beauty of the plains in a new way. The woman's presence was a constant reminder that human connection could restore hope, that even in the aftermath of tragedy, life could flourish. He began to look forward to each day, knowing that he was no longer facing it alone. The woman also shared lessons of self-care, encouraging the cowboy to rest when he could, and to take moments to appreciate the world around him. She showed him how to use herbs from the land to ease minor aches and to create simple remedies for the baby's discomfort. Her knowledge of nature became a source of empowerment, giving the cowboy tools to manage life on the ranch with confidence and skill. As weeks turned into months, the bond between the cowboy and the woman strengthened. It was a bond built on mutual respect, trust, and shared purpose. They communicated through words, gestures, and understanding, each recognizing the other's strengths and contributions. She never overstepped, always allowing the cowboy to lead, but she guided him in ways that made life smoother, safer, and more joyful. The baby thrived under their combined care. His cries became less frequent as he learned the comfort of routines, the warmth of consistent care, and the gentle presence of those who loved him. The cowboy often paused to watch his son sleep, feeling a swell of pride and gratitude. The small child had survived the early months of life against the odds, and now he was growing stronger every day. The father understood that this survival was not his alone. It was the result of help, guidance, and compassion arriving at precisely the right moment. Evenings were filled with quiet conversation, laughter, and reflection. They shared stories of the land, of life before hardship, and of hopes for the future. The cowboy learned about her traditions, her knowledge of plants, and her experiences living closely with nature. In turn, he shared memories of his wife, the joys and struggles of raising a child alone, and the lessons he had learned through months of perseverance. Their connection became a source of emotional support, a reminder that resilience could be strengthened by companionship. One evening, after the baby had fallen asleep, the cowboy looked out at the horizon. The plains stretched endlessly before him, but the loneliness that had once seemed so vast had been replaced by a sense of community and hope. The woman's presence had transformed their lives, turning a ranch of struggle and sorrow into a home of care, learning, and possibility. The cowboy realized that the future was no longer uncertain in the same way. With guidance, patience, and support, he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. The cowboy worked with renewed energy, confident in his abilities, and reassured by the woman's steady presence. The baby grew stronger, happier, and more curious each day, thriving under the combined care of his father and their new friend. Challenges still arose, as they always would, but the burden of facing them alone had lifted. Hope had returned, grounded in practical support and the quiet power of human kindness. Through it all, the cowboy carried a profound sense of gratitude. He understood that survival was more than endurance. It was connection, guidance, and shared effort. The woman had brought not only knowledge but also compassion, teaching him that even in the harshest conditions, life could flourish with care and attention. He no longer felt as isolated, no longer feared the endless horizon, because he knew that help could arrive, that others could understand, and that love could guide even the smallest and most vulnerable through hardship. And in the quiet evenings, as he held his son and watched the stars appear one by one, the cowboy understood that this chapter of their lives, the chapter of despair and struggle, was giving way to something brighter. With a woman's guidance, the ranch became a place of possibility. The baby, a symbol of hope, and the father a man strengthened not only by hardship, but by the care and wisdom of those who answered when help was needed most. The morning sun rose over the plains, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and pink. The cowboy awoke earlier than usual, feeling a calm he had not known for many months. The baby slept soundly in his crib, the tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. For the first time, the cowboy could take a deep breath without the weight of desperation pressing on him. Life had changed. Hope had returned. He looked out at the ranch, at the animals grazing peacefully, and at the horizon that stretched endlessly before him. And he realized that the struggle of the past months had led to this quiet, beautiful moment. The Apache woman arrived shortly after sunrise, as she had for many weeks now. But this morning felt different. There was a lightness in her step, a warmth in her smile that spoke of shared triumphs and victories over the hardships that had once seemed impossible. She approached with the baby in her arms, the child cooing softly, eyes bright with curiosity. The cowboy felt a surge of gratitude, realizing that together they had not only survived but had begun to thrive. The bond between father, child, and guide was now strong, rooted in trust, care, and shared effort. Together they moved through the morning routine with ease. The cowboy fed the animals. The woman assisted in organizing the day, and the baby giggled from time to time, exploring the world with growing energy. Tasks that had once been exhausting and overwhelming now seemed manageable, even enjoyable. The cowboy found himself laughing aloud at the baby's antics, feeling a lightness in his heart that had been absent for months. It was a joy he had feared lost forever, and yet here it was, tangible and bright, filling the ranch with life. The woman taught him even more practical lessons. She showed him how to predict changes in weather by observing the clouds and the wind, how to make the ranch safer for the baby as he began to crawl and explore, and how to tend to the animals in a way that saved time and effort. Each lesson was simple, yet powerful, giving the cowboy confidence that he could manage the challenges of life on his own while also accepting guidance when needed. He realized that help did not diminish his strength. Rather, it amplified it. As the day wore on, the cowboy and the woman worked side by side. The baby explored nearby under careful supervision, laughing when a butterfly landed on the grass or when a dog bounded happily toward him. The sound of the baby's laughter filled the air, echoing across the plains, a symbol of hope, growth, and the resilience of life. The cowboy could hardly believe that this small child, who had cried endlessly in the early months, had become such a source of joy and energy. Each smile, each giggle, reinforced the father's determination to give him the best life possible. In the afternoon, the woman suggested a walk beyond the edge of the ranch. She wanted the cowboy to see the land from a new perspective, to realize the beauty and abundance that existed beyond the immediate struggles of daily life. Carrying the baby safely in her arms, she led the way through a narrow path lined with wildflowers, while the cowboy followed, absorbing the sights, sounds, and smells of the open plains. The baby pointed at the sky and the birds, cooing with delight, and the cowboy felt a profound sense of gratitude for the presence of both the child and the woman in his life. They paused near a small stream, the water sparkling under the sunlight. The woman knelt, dipping her hand in the cool water, and encouraged the cowboy to do the same. "Life flows like this stream," she said gently. "It moves forward, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, but it always continues. You have endured much, but now you can embrace what comes next." The cowboy listened, absorbing the wisdom in her words. For the first time, he could truly see that the past months of struggle were not just a burden. They were part of a journey that had led him to this moment of possibility and hope. As evening approached, they returned to the ranch. The baby, tired from exploring, fell asleep quickly in his crib. The cowboy sat on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of deep orange and purple. He reflected on the journey they had taken, from the first days of despair and isolation, through the long months of struggle, to the arrival of help that had changed everything. He realized that the strength of human connection, the willingness to accept guidance, and the compassion of another person had transformed their lives. The Apache woman joined him on the porch, offering a quiet smile. "You have done well," she said softly. "Your strength, your care, your love, they have carried this child through the most difficult days. And now, with guidance and support, life can be even brighter." The cowboy nodded, feeling the weight of her words and the truth within them. He had learned that perseverance alone was not enough. Openness to help and kindness was equally important. Night fell, and the first stars appeared in the sky. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled, and the wind whispered through the grass. The cowboy felt a sense of peace he had never known, a deep certainty that the future held promise. He knew there would still be challenges, storms, sickness, and days of exhaustion, but he also knew that they would face them together. He was no longer alone. His child had love, care, and protection. He had guidance and friendship, and he had hope for the days to come. The woman stayed for a while longer, helping the cowboy settle the evening chores, tucking the baby in with care, and offering advice for the night. When she finally prepared to leave, she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Remember," she said, "life is strongest when shared. You have learned to care, to endure, and to love. Now you know that help is not a weakness, it is a strength." The cowboy nodded, understanding that this was more than advice. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As she disappeared into the night, the cowboy sat quietly on the porch, holding his sleeping child close. The stars shone brightly above, and the wind carried a sense of promise across the plains. He thought of the months of struggle, the endless cries, and the nights of despair, and he realized how far they had come. The journey had been difficult, but it had led to growth, understanding, and a profound appreciation for the bonds that sustained them. In the following days, life settled into a new rhythm. The cowboy became more confident in his abilities, managing the ranch and caring for the baby with skill and patience. The baby grew stronger, happier, and more curious, exploring the world under the careful guidance of his father. The ranch became a place of comfort, safety, and laughter, a stark contrast to the isolation and despair of earlier months. The cowboy had learned that life, while unpredictable and often challenging, could also be filled with joy, hope, and connection. He reflected on the lessons learned during the past months. Strength was not measured by solitude or endurance alone. It was measured by the willingness to accept help, to nurture life, and to embrace the bonds that make human existence meaningful. His grief for his wife remained, but it no longer dominated his heart. Instead, it became a gentle presence, a memory that inspired love and perseverance rather than despair. The baby reached milestones that filled the cowboy with pride. First words, first steps, and the laughter that followed each small achievement. The ranch thrived under careful management, the animals healthy and content, the fields producing well. The cowboy realized that life had shifted from mere survival to genuine flourishing. He had endured the harshest months and emerged not only capable but wise, tempered by experience and guided by compassion. Even in moments of quiet reflection, he felt the presence of the woman's guidance. Her teachings, her calm assurance, and her knowledge of the land had transformed more than just their daily routines. They had transformed his perspective on life. He understood that no one could face every challenge alone, and that true strength came from courage, care, and connection. As the sun set one evening, painting the plains in rich shades of red and gold, the cowboy held his child on his lap and looked out at the horizon. The ranch, once a place of isolation and struggle, now felt like a home filled with promise. He thought of the months of hardship, the long nights of tears and cries, and the moment when hope had arrived in the form of a compassionate stranger. The journey had been long, but it had led to growth, understanding, and a renewed faith in life. And in that quiet golden moment, the cowboy made a silent vow to cherish each day, to nurture his child with love and care, and to honor the guidance and kindness that had reached him when he needed it most. He knew that challenges would come again, as they always would, but he also knew that they would face them together, strengthened by love, wisdom, and the enduring bond that had carried them through the darkest months. The baby looked up at him, eyes shining with curiosity and trust, and the cowboy smiled. He knew that life was not perfect, and that hardship would return in some form, but the fear and despair that had once defined their days had been replaced with hope and determination. Together they would continue forward, guided by love, strengthened by care, and inspired by the knowledge that even in the harshest wilderness, compassion and human connection could create a future filled with light. And as night fell over the plains, with stars twinkling high above, the cowboy held his child close, feeling the warmth and promise of a new beginning. The ranch, the plains, and the endless sky bore witness to their journey, a story of loss, endurance, hope, and the extraordinary power of human kindness. The hardships of the past months had forged a bond that would last a lifetime, and in the quiet of the night, with the baby safe in his arms, the cowboy finally understood the true meaning of resilience, love, and home.